Hi class, and welcome to your next video on ecology. So let's start out with a basic understanding of what ecology is. Then we're going to break it up into how we use energy and how it travels through our ecosystems. So first off, ecology is the study of interactions among organisms and between organisms and their abiotic environment. Anything biotic is living, so bacteria, plants, fungi, animals, anything that meets those 7 characteristics of life. Abiotic is non-living. So when you think about this, you need to think about something that truly has no life within it. So living space, temperature, sunlight, soil, wind, and precipitation are some. You can also talk about nutrients. It's kind of unlimited as long as it's not living. So it is one of the broadest fields in the biological sciences. So it's linked to other biological disciplines, and it is linked to geology, earth science, and chemistry. So we look at all of these in order to come up with our ecology. Okay, so we have levels of organization in ecology, and that just kind of tells us what we're dealing with. So the first level, you have one individual, one organism or species, just one. But then you go to a population. A population is a group of organisms of the same species that live together in the same area, same time. A species is a group of similar organisms whose members freely interbreed with one another and in the wild to produce fertile offspring. So we've talked about the mule a lot, and the mule is not a species because it cannot then go on its own. While it is the combination of a donkey and a horse, it cannot go on its own and reproduce. So remember, a species must be able to reproduce on its own. So levels of organization, the next one is community. And a community is a natural association that consists of all the populations of a different species that live and interact together within an area at the same time. So we're still talking about populations, we're just talking about multiple populations. The next one we're going to look at is an ecosystem. An ecosystem is a community and its physical environment, so it includes both our biotic and abiotic factors. In this picture you can see that we have the sun, we have the fly, we have the fish. You can include the water and what's in the water, all as part of your abiotic environment and biotic environment. So ecosystems, the ultimate goal of an ecosystem ecologist is to understand how ecosystems function. As humans increasingly alter ecosystems for their own use, the natural function of ecosystems is changed. We must learn whether these changes will affect the sustainability of our life support system. What that means is the fact that we have to sustain life through our ecosystems, and our changing these ecosystems can alter what we need from the ecosystems. We need those nutrients. We need the food that it might produce. So if we alter the circle of life too much, then we alter what we're using. So landscape ecology is a subdiscipline in ecology that studies ecological processes that operate over large areas, and a landscape is a region that includes several interacting ecosystems. So your next level is the biosphere. Biosphere is the layer of Earth that contains all living organisms. This is your highest level of organization. So in our ecosystems and in ecology, we have plants, and plants are producers. A producer is any organism that goes through the process of photosynthesis to make energy for itself in the form of sugar. Remember, they also must go through cellular respiration to release that energy. They're just creating the sugars that they need for cellular respiration. These are known as autotrophs. There are 2 types of autotrophs. There are photoautotrophs and chemioautotrophs. The photoautotrophs use the sun's energy and convert it into usable chemical energy. Chemioautotrophs use a chemical conversion and energy enabled to get their usable energy. So, the big difference, usually the photoautotrophs are on the surface of the land, and chemioautotrophs are somewhere where they can't get sun. So it's an adaptation through evolution to help them survive. We also have consumers. Consumers must ingest things such as carbohydrates, proteins, and fats for energy, just like us. And then they use the process of cellular respiration to release energy into a usable form. These are also called heterotrophs. So plants are able to produce those energies, those carbohydrates, fats, and proteins, but we must ingest them. So another thing that we have is detritus and decomposers. Detritus is dead, decaying organic matter. Anything that was once living that is now dead and is decaying due to bacteria or something else is detritus. Decomposers are organisms that return the nutrients to the soil. The two most common forms are bacteria and fungi. This does not include vultures or anything that eats detritus. Decomposers must provide nutrients back to the environment to be a decomposer. A lot of people think about vultures or things that eat roadkill as decomposers. Those are not. Those are called detritivores. So the energy flow in our ecosystems. All energy ultimately comes from the sun from photosynthesis, and energy is transferred through organisms. Each arrow in a food chain or a food web shows the direction of energy flow. So if you look here is our grass. Our grass is able to grow and produce energy from the sun through photosynthesis, and it is eaten by a cricket here. So the arrow goes to the cricket because the cricket is the one getting the energy. Food chains show one interaction in an ecosystem, and food webs show all interactions in that ecosystem. So in this, we also have trophic levels wherein a food chain an organism lies. So at the bottom, you always have primary producers. You start out a food chain, food web, food or a pyramid, all with primary producers, because all your energy ultimately comes from the sun. So our primary producers have 100% of their energy from the sun. Producers always make up the base, and 10% of the energy is transferred between trophic levels. So the thing that eats the producer is the next level, and that's the primary consumer. They are always herbivores. You're losing that other energy as heat. So in order to do some of the processes, it's going to be lost as heat. Now, when these things die, the decomposers are going to then recycle those nutrients and bring them back to the primary producers where they can go up the food chain again. So a primary producer makes all the energy, then the primary consumer eats the primary producer. The secondary consumer eats the primary consumer. The third level or tertiary level consumer eats the secondary consumer, and then the apex predator eats the third level consumer. So we have a few things that animals and organisms do in their environment. The first thing I want you to know is a niche. A niche is an animal's role in its environment. So you have a few different types of niche, though. The first one is an ecological niche. The totality of the organism's adaptations, its use of resources in the life to which it is fitted. So how does it fit into its role in the community of those organisms? And what does it do? What does it do to contribute? The fundamental niche is the potential idealized ecological niche. So maybe each carpenter ant is supposed to cut down so many leaves in one particular hour or something. The fundamental niche is saying this is what should happen. The realized niche then is the lifestyle of an organism actively pursues and the resource it actually uses. So it might be, we're saying the fundamental niche is it's going to cut down 10 leaves every hour and get it back. Well, the realized niche is that might only be 5 or 7 depending on where it is and the availability of resources and how it actually uses the resource of time. Habitat is the place an organism lives. So, for example, a bear lives in a den, a bird lives in a nest. It can also be an exact place like the desert, tundra, forest, marine environment. It can be even more exact than that. It can be like a clownfish lives in an anemone in the marine environment specifically in a certain area of that marine environment because of the temperature. So we then have how these organisms live together. So this is called symbiosis. Symbiosis is an intimate relationship between or association between two or more species, and it includes three different kinds. They're mutualism, commensalism, and parasitism. It is the result of coevolution, the interdependent evolution of two interacting species. So they've evolved separately, but they interact together. So this is how symbiosis occurs. So the first one is parasitism. You're probably very familiar with parasitism. It's a symbiotic relationship in which one species, the parasite, benefits at the expense of the other, the host. So the parasite obtains nourishment from its host, but although a parasite weakens the host, it rarely kills it because then its nutrient source is gone. An example would be lice or bed bugs in humans. It would be worms in dogs, anything that really draws off of that. Mutualism is an association in which both organisms benefit. So your example here is the acacia ant and the bull's horn acacia plant. The ants make a hollow nest out of thorns at the base of the plant's leaves and gain special nutrients from the leaf tips. Both must benefit. So here we see that the ants have a place to live, and the leaves of the plant get those nutrients. So both benefit. You have to have a beneficial relationship for both here. And commensalism is a symbiotic relationship in which one species benefits, but the other isn't helped or harmed. So tropical tree and epiphytes, which are smaller plants that live attached to the tree's bark. The tree doesn't really get anything, but the epiphytes don't take anything, and the tree gives the epiphytes a place to live. So that's how it's a commensalistic relationship in which one benefits and one's not hurt nor harmed. Okay, next is competition and predation. Predation is the consumption of one species, the prey, by another species, the predator. Competition is the interaction among the organisms that vie for the same resources in an ecosystem, such as food or living space. So interspecific competition is a competition occurring between different species, and intraspecific is competition occurring within individuals of a population. So interspecific between different species, intraspecific between individuals of that population, which would be the same species. And lastly, our keystone species. They are vital in determining the ecosystem's species composition and how the ecosystem functions. They're usually not the most abundant species in an ecosystem, but they are the one that holds the whole ecosystem together. Other species are greatly dependent on this species. The keystone species may only be revealed when it's removed from the ecosystem. Therefore, the ecosystem collapses due to the loss of this species. Okay, I hope you got great notes. There were not a whole lot of pictures that you needed. You might have wanted like the trophic levels and the food web. Otherwise, bring your notes and we will talk about this in class.